Let's talk about the step-by-step process you need to be taking to go from 0 to hero in your handstand. Here's something I've heard quite a few times this week, and I felt like dumping a video just about that. When we discover finally what we're supposed to be doing to progress in handstands, when the light bulb switches on in our brain, we sometimes assume that everything should come magically and instantaneously to us. And that's quite far from the truth. To understand that, we're gonna go through a model of skill acquisition applied to handstand. In the process, we're going to elaborate a 5-step model you want to follow to progress faster in handstands. To understand what we're talking about, let's use an analogy. When it comes to handstands, you are literally lost in the maze in the dark. You do not see where you're going, and you're trying to make your way out of the maze. When you finally know what you're supposed to be doing because you're sitting with yourself or with a coach, and you look at what you're strong at and at what you're not so good at, so that you can improve your consistency, your duration, which is how long you can hold it upside down, or your alignment, which is how your body looks once you're upside down. By pinning down what you need to improve, you have finally a light to navigate the maze. But having a light is not enough to know by heart the path you have to take to get out of the maze. So once you know, thanks to the light, where the exit is, you have to go through that path over and over again. It's a matter of iterations until you can do it eyes closed, because you exactly know which turn to take when to get out of the maze. That's what handstands should be. But just because you have the light is not enough. You then have to proceed through iterations until you automate things. Overall, beginners and improvers tend to lack clarity in their handstand journey, specifically when it comes to assessing how long it should take them to get to their goals. This is due to 3 main things. 1, you are downplaying how hard handstands actually are. And by hard, I also mean beautifully complex. 2, you haven't set clear goals. And 3, you do not know the landmarks that will take you from where you are to your goals. Let's see those 3 elements step by step. 1, downplaying how complex it is. Everybody knows a kid, a daughter, a son, a niece, who is going through gymnastic classes and can handstand. Performing a handstand is not flipping yourself upside down and kind of holding it wobbling for 2 seconds until you cartwheel out of that. That's what you do when you play on your hands, but that's not what a performative handstand actually is. To understand that, picture a Cirque du Soleil show. When you go to see a professional show in circus, you see wonderful, amazing things like double trapeze and people flying in the air, or acrobats flipping on the floor. And instantaneously you recognize how skilled those people are and how many hours they have poured into that craft. Somewhere in between the acts, there is a hand balancing act. And surprisingly, just because we see those kids stand on their hands, we think, well, that's not as impressive as the rest. And surely it doesn't look as flashy, but you have to understand that the person there performing their hand balancing act also has dedicated their lives to this craft. It is just as complex, as hard a skill as the others you have been watching throughout the show. And because it's complex, you have to approach it accordingly. 2, getting clear on your goals. Saying, I want to be able to handstand, which is the answer I usually get when I ask people, why are you attending this class? What are you expecting out of it? Is not good enough an answer. It would be the same as saying, I just want to learn to run. Oh yeah? But what kind of a run are you talking about? Is this going to be a marathon, or is this going to be a sprint? You have to be a bit more specific about your goals. By having specific goals, you can then design better training routines which will get you to your goals faster. And as we will see, fast is a relative term here. Handstands do not come in days or in weeks. Our mission is to ensure that we don't waste years in the process. How do we make our goals more specific? Well, 3 main variables you really want to think of. First, consistency, which is the frequency you can catch a handstand when you try. Do you want an automatic handstand for which you don't have to think, you just go on your hands and boom, you have a handstand? Or is it okay for you if you try a few times? And in some contexts, it will be. If you're just trying to impress your uncles and your cousins at your Christmas dinner, it's okay if it takes you a few tries to get to that 10-second handstand. But if you're trying to perform in front of an audience, you don't have the luxury of failing. Consistency, therefore, has to be clarified. Then comes duration, which is how long does a handstand has to be? The reality of it is it doesn't always have to be 60 seconds. You want to know short, mid, and long term what you are aspiring to be able to hold your handstand for. If you are in a yoga class trying to float from one position to the other, you don't need 15 seconds. 5 to 10 seconds may be more than enough. And the way you're gonna train has to be adapted accordingly. Finally, we have alignment, which is the way your body is positioned upside down. Probably you have some specific goals in terms of how your body should look like. And many of those goals are oriented around aesthetics. It just looks prettier this way. You have to recognize what position you are after, and if you are chasing a few positions simultaneously, you have to prioritize which one you want first. Third element, we want to know the landmarks that take us from where we are to that goal that we have now clarified a bit more in terms of duration, consistency, and alignment. This is super important because the goal you have in mind is probably 3, 6, 12 months away. So we need to take stocks of landmarks along the ways, which will show us whether or not we are progressing, ensuring that we are on the right tracks, and allow us to tweak the way we train accordingly to ensure that we stay on the right path. This is the harder thing to understand. And this is what I do myself as a coach with my students, ensuring that they keep their eyes focused on the next progression that matters to them. Let me give you a very broad example that of course has to be adapted to you, your unique body, your specific needs, and your goals. On your way from 0 to 5 seconds, you are going to, roughly speaking, prioritize your sense of alignment, your body awareness, even more importantly, your kick-up technique, and basic patterns when it comes to pushing and relaxing your fingers. These will need to be your priorities until you get 5 seconds for standing, and that can take you quite some time. For each of those elements, we have sub-landmarks, sub-goals to achieve to ensure that you are ticking along and progressing at a desirable pace. The moment you get 5 seconds, your priorities are gonna shift. It will now be time for you to refine your alignment, improve your finger pushing, and more importantly, learn to recover from potential mistakes that you can do as you start balancing. By the time you are beyond the 10 to 15 second mark, it is now time to talk about aesthetics. How can we open the shoulders more? How can we make this handstand look better? How can we develop more stamina when we are upside down to push how long we can hold it past the 30, 45, 60, 120 second mark. Different moments in your journey are gonna call for different goals. And so I wanna bring you back to what you were doing just earlier, trying to clarify a bit your goal and ask yourself, where are you at today? You have now an end point and a starting point, and we want to be able to draw all the landmarks, the sub goals, the small victories you will go through one after the other from today all the way up to in 1 year. Now that we have established a rough, drafty roadmap together, which is going to take us from where we are to where we want to be, we have to embrace the way handstands and skills in general are learned as adults. As we were saying, just because you have the light in the maze doesn't mean you will be able to rush your way to the exits without bumping into a few obstacles along the way. This borrows from a concept you probably have heard and seen in your social media, which says you don't know what you don't know, and suddenly when you work around it, you know what you don't know, and there's a difference between those two things. This is actually super important when it comes to learning handstands. The fact of the matter is, at first, you do not know what is right and what is wrong. You just throw yourself upside down, and if it's not working, you kind of assume that this was wrong, and you keep doing it until it works. The fact of the matter is, if you want duration, consistency, and alignment, you're gonna need to fine-tune your understanding of what's happening here. You will need to know what is right and what is wrong in terms of kick-up technique, in terms of alignment, in terms of balance, in terms of how you bail, and everything else that is relevant to handstands. So the first step as we progress is to be aware of our mistakes. to be aware of what we should do and what we shouldn't do. It's as simple as kicking up against the wall. If you're a beginner and you don't reach the wall, whatever you did there wasn't correct. If you do something else and that allows you to land on the wall, that is right. And the question becomes, why did I do differently to land on the wall that I didn't do when I didn't land on the wall? If you're a bit more advanced, we're trying to land softly against the wall or maybe float before we land on the wall. Same idea. This probably will not happen every single time you try. You cannot mindlessly do things until they magically work. You have to ask yourself, oh, this is the wrong turn in the maze. What did I do here? I didn't manage to land softly. What did I do differently? What did I do well when I managed to freeze before I landed on the wall? The first step in our process is going to be called awareness. We want to be aware of what it's like to be making a mistake and what it's like to be doing things right. Where do we draw the line? This is where we start. And suddenly we realize that we are doing things wrong a hell of a lot. The second step is mapping out the sensations. We want to associate specific sensations to when we are successful and when we're not successful. You definitely are doing something different when you manage to hit the bullseye versus when you completely miss the target. You have to start inquiring over where you feel that in your body. The next step is correction. Now that we feel in our bones the differences between doing things right and doing things wrong, it is time to learn to correct things when we're doing things wrong, to save our loss of balance, to rearrange our alignment before it's too late. The correction phase is about learning what motor patterns you have to involve to save a mistake. Handstands are an art of saving mistakes, but making those recoveries so small they're not perceptible to the outside eye. The next step is consolidation. This is where the iterations that we spoke of before come into play. We now know what we should be doing, how it feels like when we do things right, and what we should be doing when we do things wrong to recover from those mistakes. The idea is to improve the quality of those recoveries and to reduce the frequency of mistakes. Finally, we get to the desired goal and stage of automation, where the corrections happen on their own, where you don't have to think about what you should be doing for the balance to keep happening. This is, of course, the byproduct of all the hours you have poured in the previous stages. And what I want to draw your attention to today is that we do not jump from stage 1 to stage 5. Now, I want to illustrate this with a very clear example. Let's talk about balance. We all want to be able to balance longer. I'm going to assume that you cannot yet balance 5 seconds consistently, but you can use this example if you're trying to balance 30 seconds or 60 seconds. You are against the wall, pushing on your fingers and trying to balance. And most times you come back down after 2 to 3 seconds. Sometimes the stars align and you can hold it for 8 seconds. You do not want to mindlessly keep doing this until hopefully you transform those 2 seconds into 5 and 10 seconds. You, on the contrary, want to be a bit more mindful. Every time you fail at holding 5 seconds or more, you want to ask yourself, what did I do here? How does it feel like in my body, in my shoulders, in my elbows, in my hands when I lose my handstand? What, on the contrary, am I doing well when I successfully go beyond 5 seconds? Here, you're putting under the microscope your sensations and you're drawing a line between what is right and what is wrong. That's stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 3, corrections. You want to isolate the corrections that you are doing when you're performing well and work on them separately in silos at the wall to improve them. When we balance upside down, for instance, we can use fingers, shoulders, and elbows to rebalance ourselves. Maybe your fingers are not as efficient as the rest. Therefore, they're the weak link that makes you fall before the 5-second mark. Therefore, you have to find drills in which you isolate those fingers and work just on that without interfering with it with your shoulders and your elbows. Once we know what we should work on, we consolidate, we pour the hours in it, having carefully selected the drills that will meet that requirement. And through repetitions, we get to the point where it's now integrated in our bones and it happens on its own. This was again more so of a lecture than a demo, but I think it's a super important concept for you to improve the way you think about handstands, which, as you can tell from this channel, is all what I'm about. It's not just about kicking up against the wall until it sticks. It's about knowing what you should be doing, how you should be doing it, and why. And again, if you want my help with that, check out the links below. Any question, let me know in the comments.